Before we dive into one of the most pivotal battles in American history, the Battle of Gettysburg, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story that matters. In today's episode, we take you back to July 1863 to the rolling hills of Pennsylvania, where over 160,000 soldiers clashed in a brutal three-day fight that would decide the fate of a divided nation. What began as a chance encounter quickly turned into a thunderous turning point in the Civil War. But what really happened on those blood-soaked fields? Who won, who lost, and why does it still matter? To stay with us as we unravel the truth behind the Battle of Gettysburg. Welcome back to the channel. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, because today's story will take you right into the heart of America's most defining battlefield, the Battle of Gettysburg. The year was 1863, and the American Civil War was raging into its third brutal year. Across shattered fields and burning towns, the North and South were locked in a deadly struggle for the future of a nation. But deep in the South, one man had a plan that could change everything. General Robert E. Lee, the Confederate commander. Known for his brilliant battlefield tactics and unwavering confidence, his army had defeated the Union again and again. Now he wanted more than just defense. He wanted victory on Northern soil. In late June, Lee began a bold invasion of the North, pushing through Maryland into the heart of Pennsylvania, with 75,000 Confederate soldiers under his command. His goal was both strategic and psychological. A Southern victory in Union territory would break Northern morale, force Abraham Lincoln to the negotiating table, and possibly bring foreign recognition from Britain or France. The war, in Lee's mind, could be ended with one decisive blow, but the Union wasn't going to let that happen easily. President Lincoln had just appointed a new commander, General George G. Meade, to lead the Army of the Potomac. Meade had barely unpacked his bags when he was given one simple but impossible order: stop Lee. As Confederate forces spread across Pennsylvania, gathering supplies and preparing for battle, a chance encounter set history in motion. On the morning of July 1, 1863, Confederate soldiers entered the town of Gettysburg, searching for shoes, but instead of supplies, they found Union cavalry already stationed there. A skirmish broke out, and soon both sides began calling in reinforcements. What started as a minor clash quickly escalated into a full-scale battle neither side had truly planned. By midday, tens of thousands of soldiers were pouring into the rolling fields around Gettysburg. The Union forces were outnumbered and were driven back through the town itself. Chaos filled the narrow streets as civilians fled, buildings burned, and gunfire echoed through the countryside. The Union soldiers retreated to a ridge south of town known as Cemetery Hill, a high, defensible position that would become the anchor of their line. But here's where the story takes a critical turn. Despite their success on day one, the Confederate commanders hesitated. General Lee had ordered an all-out assault to crush the retreating Union troops, but his generals were cautious. That hesitation allowed the Union Army to fortify their positions, overnight positions that would become nearly impossible to break. As night fell over Gettysburg, fires lit the hillsides, the air thick with smoke, screams, and prayers. Both armies dug in, preparing for what would become one of the bloodiest battles in American history. The landscape was transforming, open fields turning into killing grounds, stone walls becoming last lines of defense, and peaceful farms twisted into nightmarish war zones. Lee believed his men could still win. He was convinced that victory lay just one more charge away. He had confidence in his army, faith in his cause, and the belief that the North would crumble under pressure. What he didn't know was that the Union had secured not just the high ground, but a position of power that would make all the difference. In the days ahead. By the end of July 1st, over 15,000 men had already fallen. Yet this was just the beginning. The real storm was coming. This was no longer just a battle, it was destiny in motion. The future of the Union, the hopes of the Confederacy, and the fate of millions hung in the balance. And none of the men lying in the grass that night, bloody, cold, and exhausted, knew that the next 48 hours would become the turning point of the entire Civil War. Stay with us, because in Chapter 2 we'll dive into the thunderous assaults the desperate last stands, and the tragic final gamble that sealed the outcome of Gettysburg. The story is just getting started. The morning of July 2nd, 1863, rose over Gettysburg like the calm before a hurricane. The rolling hills and silent fields were hiding what would soon become the site of unimaginable bloodshed. On one side stood the Confederate Army, battle-hardened and full of confidence under the command of General Robert E. Lee. On the other, the Union Army, battered but firmly entrenched, now holding the high ground under the fresh leadership of General George Meade. Neither side was willing to retreat. The entire future of the war, perhaps of the nation itself, would be decided. Here, Lee, determined to break the Union lines, studied their positions. His strategy was bold and dangerous. He believed the Union flanks, both the far left and right, were exposed. If he could crush them, he could surround the Union Army entirely. That morning, he ordered General James Longstreet to launch a massive attack on the Union left, targeting areas like Devil's Den, the Wheatfield, and the now famous Little Round Top. What followed was carnage. The Confederate assault was fierce. Wave after wave of Southern soldiers pushed uphill through rocky terrain and thick brush under a relentless sun, facing brutal resistance. At Little Round Top, a small hill anchoring the Union's left flank, a single regiment, the 20th Maine, led by Colonel Joshua Chamberlain, was all that stood between Lee's army and total collapse of the Union line. Outnumbered, exhausted, and running out of ammunition, Chamberlain made a decision that would enter the pages of history. He ordered a desperate bayonet charge, catching the advancing Confederates off guard and driving them back. It was raw courage versus certain death, and somehow the Union line held. Meanwhile, on the Union right at Culp's Hill, Confederate forces attacked again and again, trying to break through. The fighting there raged through the night, with smoke so thick and gunfire so constant it seemed like the earth itself was on fire. But still, the Union refused to give in. Their lines bent, but never broke. July 2nd ended in exhaustion and agony. The Confederates had taken some ground, but not enough. Lee was running out of time. And so, on the morning of July 3rd, he made the boldest decision of the entire campaign. He believed the center of the Union line at Cemetery Ridge was now weakened after 2 days of brutal fighting on the flanks. If he could punch through it with one overwhelming attack, the Union Army would split in two and the South would have its victory. This final assault would be led by General George Pickett, and would go down in history as one of the most tragic and courageous moments of the Civil War. Nearly 12,500 Confederate soldiers lined up on the open field, men from Virginia, Tennessee, North Carolina, knowing they were about to walk into a storm of death. They marched shoulder to shoulder, flags flying, drums beating, across almost a mile of open ground directly into the heart of Union artillery fire. Cannonballs tore through ranks, muskets cracked from behind stone walls, and the battlefield turned into a nightmare. Still, the Confederates pressed on. Some reached the Union line. Hand-to-hand combat erupted atop the ridge. But they were too few, and the price was too high. In less than an hour, Pickett's charge had failed. Over 6,000 Confederate soldiers lay dead or wounded. When Pickett returned to Lee, shattered and heartbroken, he simply said, "General, I have no division now." Lee took full responsibility, his voice heavy with regret. His grand gamble had failed. The South's best chance at victory in the North had collapsed in blood and smoke on July 4th. The same day that the city of Vicksburg fell to Union forces in the West, Lee's army began a long, painful retreat back to Virginia. The Battle of Gettysburg was over. In just 3 days. Over 51,000 men had become casualties, the largest and bloodiest battle ever fought on American soil. The Confederate momentum was shattered. Gettysburg was not just a Union victory. It was the turning point of the entire Civil War. Months later, President Abraham Lincoln would come to this battlefield to honor the fallen. In just a few brief words, the Gettysburg Address, he would remind the nation why these men had fought and died. Not just for victory, but for a new birth of freedom, for a country where government of the people, by the people, for the people, would not perish from the earth. Gettysburg was more than a clash of armies, it was a test of the nation's soul. and it proved that courage, unity, and sacrifice could stand even in the face of darkness. If this story moved you, taught you something new, or gave you a deeper understanding of our shared history, then please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with others who need to hear it. There are more stories to tell, and together, we'll keep the past alive.